The usual statement is that unaccustomed as I am to public speaking, and usually when I address a jury, I expect to be paid, but I'm going to forego that on this occasion. I feel really honored to have been asked to come here and talk to you and talk a little bit about what I know about Tuscaloosa, but primarily what I want to emphasize is a change that I have seen in the years that I've been here. On a personal note, I came here in 1946, total stranger to Alabama. They ran me out of New Mexico, my home state, for stealing chickens. But I wanted to go to law school. We didn't have a law school in New Mexico at the time, so we were compelled to go out of state. And my brother had married an Alabama girl during the war, settled in Mobile County. When I got out of service, my ship was decommissioned in New York. I dropped down through Mobile County, and he asked me where I was going to go to law school. I said, well, I don't know, I'll apply to a number of schools. And he said, well, I understand there's a good law school at the University of Alabama. Where is that? He said, Tuscaloosa. I said, where's Tuscaloosa? He said, I don't know, I've never been there. So before I left Citronelle, Alabama, a little town in northern part of the county, Mobile County, I wrote a letter to the university and asked to be admitted. I went home. I remember it was on a Friday. I'd gone to Albuquerque. At that time, we were living in a little town called Mountain Air, New Mexico. And my mother called and said, we had a call from your brother, Melvin, and said you have to be in Tuscaloosa next Tuesday. And this was Friday afternoon. So I made arrangements and came to Tuscaloosa. And as I recall, it was right around the high holidays, because after I got here, I was here a few days, didn't know anybody, and I said, well, I want to go to Temple. So I went to the Temple on University Boulevard. And I said, this is a cold community. No one greeted me. No one said, well, we're happy to see you. But then that's part of my personality, so I've forgiven all of them. I came here and did not really become part of the community because I was engrossed in trying to be a good student in the law school. Then I was offered a job here with a law firm, and that's how I came here. And what I wanted to talk about, it's coincidental that this aerial photograph was made the year I came to. Can't open this thing for me, please. See if you can open it. Or maybe it doesn't open. Maybe. You press it. That's the button. Okay. What I wanted to do. The thing I want to talk about is what changes have occurred in this congregation. When I came to Tuscaloosa, I think there were two other lawyers, Edwin Rosenfeld and Jonas Spiro. Some of y'all would remember Jonas. Mr. Rosenfeld was not much involved in the temple. I don't think he ever attended. Certainly Jonas did, and his family did. So I was the third lawyer, Jewish lawyer. Dr. Keller, as I recall, was the only Jewish doctor. And then Ruth, your mother-in-law's brother, practiced here for a while, did he not? Yes. Lesser, Dr. Lesser, but he didn't stay long. So wasn't he the second Jewish doctor here then? To the best of my recollection, that's right. At the law school, when I was in school, there were no Jewish law professors. I asked Doris tonight to remind me when Harry came as the first he was the first Jewish professor in the law school. I wasn't very well acquainted with the undergraduate school, so I don't know how many Jewish professors we had here then. I know Jerome Schweitzer, 4.
Yeah. Jerome and Harry Lipson.
No, Harry came later.
He was here when we came, so he was.
Yeah, but he came after
you.
After I was, yeah. And who else, please? Well, Morris Mayer, but Morris Mayer was a freshman in undergraduate school when I was a freshman in law school. Of course, Morrison had a wonderful reputation. The students I know were very fond of him.
I can tell you that Morris' first year on the faculty was as a lecturer, not a professor, and that was in 1957.
57.
57.
Well,
Yep.
what I wanted to show you,
I did know.
I was with this pointer here. If you will look right there, that's what we used to call the Ted Story building. It was the First National Bank building. What is that, PNC now? And I started practicing law in 1949 on the 10th floor. Right here is Brown's Corner. Your mashpucha. The Brown, what was that building built in 1928, I believe. There were 3, let's see, your mother, no. Bernice Brown, Barbara Brown, and Betty Betty Bloom. And that was, Betty Bloom was Stan's mother.
Right.
Yeah. But anyway, they were located right here on that corner. Now, what I have done, no, I didn't do it. I had one of the clerks in my office, one of the runners. Here's University Boulevard. Here's Greensboro Boulevard. Here is Brown's Corner. And if you take Brown's Corner, what was downtown? Central Shoe Store, the Applebaums, Weasel's Men's Store around the corner on Greensboro Avenue. And then there was Schweitzer's Men's Store, same block. Black Friedman and Winston, a men's store across the street. Sokol Furniture in the next block. And around the corner from the bank building, there was a little store. I think they sold a little bit of everything, but I know, as y'all have, some of the, I don't want to use old timers, some of the people that were here then reminded me they would get rye bread shipped in from Birmingham, and they would call Cartsidel. Huh? Huh?
They were in the block behind the bank building.
Yeah, it was behind the bank building, wasn't it? Yeah, where that addition was put on there.
Greensboro.
Yeah, but there was Central Shoe, Weasel's Menswear, Schweitzer's, Black Friedman, Sokol, Cartsidel on University Boulevard. Brown's Department Store on the corner, Pizit's Ladies Wear. Aubrey Buckhalter and his twin brother opened Twins Men's Store. Later they moved around to 6th Street, but they started out on University Boulevard. Across the street was Adrian's on the corner where De Palma is. Weasel's Women's next in the same block. Cohen Department Store was a block down. They left shortly after I came here. There was the Friedman family had a cotton brokerage, and I remember Don Rosenfeld's father worked there. Berman Auto Parts, Bela's parents, had Berman Auto, Stein Shoe Repair, where Larry started. Mr. Goldfarb was selling the new shoes. They finally moved when Pizit's closed. Larry moved around on the University Boulevard. Bert Banks' father had a second-hand store, later became a Army-Navy store. Raymond's Women's Apparel was on 6th Street. On 21st Avenue was Nita's Dry Goods, a little store. Stout Women's Clothes with the Kravitz, Morton and Kravitz. And I counted right in that confined, oh yeah, and Timerson's steel, scrap iron and steel were right over here. So I counted 21 or 22 merchants. Now, not down, out of the that little confined downtown area, the Siegel brothers had a auto parts store in Alberta City. Rosenfeld Paper Company finally moved on to 23rd, but I don't know where they were located. Gary's father and I bought that business. And then there was Raymond's Grocery on 10th Street. Now at Raymond's, you could get a pretty good salami sandwich. I lived with a bunch of law students, and we would study till about 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and then we would go to Raymond's and get a salami sandwich. And I remember we would try to olives and little stuff like that, and we were a bunch of country boys. We didn't know what capers were. Now, did you ever try to eat a caper? So the point of it is, what was the Jewish community then? This was the heart of it. We had two Jewish congregations here. We had the Temple Emanuel, and we also had an Orthodox. A lot of people don't remember that. And they met in what was then the Hillel House. The Hillel House was later Leopard's Furniture, Antiques. Now it's a law office. And that Orthodox community lasted until, I think, when they moved from University Boulevard to the temple on 10th Street. That's when they merged. And I went to the Orthodox because of having lived in Rochester till I was 12 and coming from grandparents that were strictly Orthodox. That's what I was used to. I didn't understand what they were talking about. But I remember as a child going there, and it was very reminiscent, and it brought me back to my childhood. And so, what now, what percentage of the Jewish community in Tuscaloosa now it came here because of the university? Pretty good show of the hands.
I came as a student.
Yeah, and so all I wanted to bring to you is a little history, and there were two Jewish lawyers when I joined as the third one Jewish doctor, as I recall. But one of the great things about Tuscaloosa, as a Jew, you were not invited to, and you could not join the country club, Mobile, Montgomery, Birmingham. But at least one or two of the founders of the Tuscaloosa Country Club were Jews. This has always been a welcoming community to Jewish people. Always. That's my history here. To get on a personal note, I was going back to New Mexico when I graduated. George LeMaitre had a law firm downtown. I beg your pardon? Yeah. Well, George LeMaitre asked me what I was going to do, and I said, when I graduated, I said, well, I'm going to New Mexico. and he offered me a job. Now, a Jewish kid graduating from the University of Alabama Law School could not hope to be invited to join a firm in Birmingham, Mobile, Montgomery, because we had Jewish law firms in Birmingham. Abe Berkowitz was a great lawyer. And then the Cerroti firm. There were 4 lawyers. They're now probably one of the biggest in the state of Alabama. And so, you know, here's a kid from out of state, Jewish, and I was invited to join George LeMaitres law firm. But that's not all. We were welcome into the country club, and I remember we had we didn't have what was the lady, not junior league,
Junior welfare.
junior welfare. I talked to Bela about who was the first Jewish girl invited to welfare, and as I recall, it was Bert Banks' wife, Connie.
I think it was this, you said Sis Weasel,
Sis Weasel,
Berenstein.
Berenstein. All right, Bunky, they had Weasel's men's store downtown. What the Jews, some of our most prominent citizens were Jews. And of course, the first to come to my mind is Money Sokol. Money Sokol has done so much for this community. His name is on one of a great park in Tuscaloosa. He was one of the first to receive the citizen, what do they call it, the honor roll. A few years later, Star Bloom. And then again, on a personal note, in 1970, after Kent State, when we had all of the disruption, the student riots, you were here then. You remember all that? You were here then. And they had the mass arrest. There was demonstrations. I think a small building was burned. And the police went on the campus and arrested the demonstrators, including some professors. And then they start having the trials in the municipal court. Judge Burns was the old judge, had been here for many years. And if a policeman arrested you, that made you automatically guilty. It didn't matter, you didn't listen to evidence. If they wouldn't arrest you if you weren't. You remember the court-martial in the Army? They wouldn't court-martial if you weren't guilty. We know that's a fallacy. Colonel, now, you got to remember, is that right? I sat on a court-martial board. I know what the executive officer told us. But anyway, the police commissioner came to me and said, Gordon, would you take over and try those cases? I know that was a public service. They didn't pay us. They didn't pay me. And then later they asked me to be the municipal judge. And the only reason I bring this up, well, I want accolades to myself, but mostly I want to point out that there was no bias against Jews in this community. We were accepted. We did our part. We were part of the community. And I think that was the history of this community before we came here. I think it's the history. I think it's the presence now. Money Sokol, Star Bloom, though. Yes, sir.
How do you account for that?
I guess if you ever, I guess the truthful answer is I don't know. But I could speculate that it started, I beg your pardon?
I think the size of Tuscaloosa had something to do with being,
Accepted so well
Accepted
in the
or-
community.
A what now?
diversified.
Well, anyway, and I can't account for it, but I know that's the history of this community. And we have to appreciate that and hope that we conduct ourselves so that that tradition lives on. The Rotary Rose, we have Rotarians here? Isn't that an award given every year to a citizen who has done outstanding service? Yes. As I recall, Ethel Timerson and Mrs. Weasel, what was her name? Was it Alice? Alice Weasel, different years, were awarded the Rotary Rose. Money Sokol, of course, has a park named after him. Bert Bank. Bert's family had the second-hand store, later became the Army-Navy store. Bert, as you know, was in the Bataan Death March over 3 years as a POW in the Japanese prisoner of war. Came out of the war legally blind. Tell you a funny story about that. When he got a divorce and his family, his wife and the children moved to Memphis, and when his youngest son was going to have bar mitzvah, he asked me to go to Memphis with him. I said, fine. I thought he wanted me to drive. Well, we got in his car, and he said, no, I'm going to drive. Well, we started to Memphis, and he'd come up and he's going to pass, and he said, is it clear? Is it clear? But then later, Bert was elected as a representative in the legislature in Montgomery for a number of terms.
Hadn't he been president of the student body at Alabama?
No, he was head of the cotillion club.
Oh, I thought he was president.
Well, the head of the student body was Don Siegel. His parent, the Siegel brothers, had an auto parts store in Alberta City, and Don was a student president. He's a prominent lawyer in Birmingham, a great lawyer, great friend, and a Tuscaloosa boy. We had some great professors at the university, and I know so many students that I talked to that went through the Commerce School, and they always talked about what a great professor and how Morris Mayer was really appreciated by his students. And Gail, you know, I remember when we had a choir that we had to buy a choir, and you brought such great music. They didn't have the what we have today. And thank you very much. Now, Bela, not nearly as old as I am, but I guess Bela, let's see, you were born here. What other? No one else of your generation. Oh, I've heard. Hey, you're not of her generation. You're the old Bela. Does anybody else here remember attending temple on the old temple on University Boulevard, other than Bela?
That was the one, that was the one that was.
No, you're on 10th Street. You're too young to remember. Well, Bela, and you remember the lady that wrote the letter to the editor about our beloved temple? Well, y'all didn't know it. Bela remembers it. I remember it. But since then, Bela's going to talk more on that subject about our different temples here. But what I particularly wanted to emphasize, what a great community we live in for people of our faith. And the opportunities they've given to us and what we've tried to give back to the community, and I hope that continues to be what we do. It's our legacy. We owe it to the community. Thank you very much.